In 1996, American philosopher Hubert Dreyfus wrote in What Computers Still Can't Do That, "No system, no matter how deeply trained, can ever replace real lived experience, that space where understanding is shaped by missteps, uncertainty, and instinct." And yet, less than 3 decades later, that prediction begins to wobble. With the arrival of tools like ChatGPT, artificial intelligence is not merely participating in the intellectual lives of humans, it is steadily reshaping our very definitions of thinking. Make no mistake, ChatGPT offers remarkable power. It can draft essays, summarize theories, analyze poetry, propose business strategies, or translate ancient Greek into English in seconds. It doesn't just answer questions, it generates new questions. It's not artificial intelligence in the old-fashioned sense. It is a system trained on the collective archive of human knowledge and expression. But the further we zoom out, the clearer a paradox emerges. The more power we have to outsource thinking, the less we seem to engage in thinking at all. It's akin to injecting synthetic testosterone. Performance skyrockets, but your body's natural hormone production shuts down. This is what we call knowledge dopengan, enhanced cognitive performance, brought about by technology, accompanied by the atrophy of the very faculties it aims to empower: patience, doubt, and the ability to dwell in not knowing. Cognitive psychology has long warned of a phenomenon called the generation effect, first described by Slameka Graf in 1978, which shows that people remember information better when they generate it themselves, rather than simply receive it. That means, if you write something in your own words, your neural pathways are activated far more deeply than when you copy or read passively. But with ChatGPT able to compose your thoughts from scratch, you may be skipping the entire process of forming an idea, process that is, in fact, the very core of critical thinking. Jean Piaget once said, "Intelligence is what you use when you don't know what to do." But today, with a system always ready to suggest the next move, we rarely experience the state of not knowing. And yet, it's precisely in that murky, uncertain space where ambiguity reigns and easy answers are absent that creativity is born. Poet John Keats called this negative capability, the capacity to live with uncertainty without grasping for immediate resolution. ChatGPT, by design, always has a resolution. Cognitive offloading, a term defined by Betsy Sparrow and colleagues at Columbia University as the act of transferring mental tasks to tools outside the brain. This is not new. From the calculator to Google, we've been shifting cognitive load outward for decades. But ChatGPT marks a qualitative leap. It doesn't just store or compute, it simulates thought itself. In a 2011 study published in Science, Sparrow found that when people believe information is easily retrievable, they exert far less effort to remember the content itself, instead remembering where to find it. This raises a troubling implication. If we become accustomed to typing to know rather than thinking to understand, we risk losing the very muscle of grasping meaning. Knowledge is not a commodity that can be handed over like a package. It is something forged in the friction between self and subject, between knowing and not knowing. When ChatGPT becomes the constant mediator between learner and knowledge, that friction is reduced. The result? Essays may improve, but the thinking self becomes unmoored. Sociology adds another layer. Neil Postman, who famously warned of technology's invisible impacts, argued, "Every new technology doesn't just change what we do, it changes what we value." When the camera arrived, memory was no longer about recollection, but about recording. When computers appeared, logic became algorithmic. And now, as large language models infiltrate our academic and creative worlds, the intellectual self risks dissolving into a sea of simulation. We must ask, if a poem written by AI moves us, are our emotions still real? If a compelling argument persuades us, but its author is a machinidos, our agreement reflect empathy or merely our susceptibility to mimicked human speech? Andy Clark's extended mind thesis argued that tools aren't merely aids, they become part of the cognitive system. When you use a notebook to capture thoughts, that notebook is an extension of your brain. So if you use ChatGPT to think, does the model become part of you? The answer isn't clear-cut. A notebook doesn't generate content, it records the content you produce. ChatGPT, on the other hand, suggests language, shapes ideas, even writes your conclusion for you. It's not an external memory, it's a co-author. There's nothing inherently wrong with using powerful tools. In sports, doping is banned not just for fairness, but because it undermines the body's autonomy. In thought, the ethical question isn't simply, should I use this? But, if I do, am I still the one thinking? When a writer uses AI to produce a novel and succeeds, where is the line between literary talent and prompt engineering? Still, we should not frame AI purely as a threat. It's also a profound opportunity. Just as the camera allowed non-painters to tell stories visually, ChatGPT allows people with difficulty expressing themselves to participate in the linguistic world. For the disabled, the marginalized, or the creative but inarticulate, AI can be a liberation. The real issue is how we use it. Some users engage with AI as a form of inner dialogue, like a composer using a piano to think in sound. They ask, revise, challenge, delete, rewrite, not to avoid thinking, but to deepen it. For them, ChatGPT does not replace thought, it amplifies it. But for many novice users, especially students where the process of learning matters more than the output, over-reliance on AI is like memorizing the answer key without ever learning how to ask a question. So this isn't just a tech debate, it's an educational, philosophical, and ethical one. It forces us to reconsider, what does it mean to truly know something? If education is about cultivating autonomy in thought, then AI, when misused, can corrode that very foundation. But if education is merely about producing deliverable essays, presentations, pitch decks, then AI is the perfect assistant. We've overcome fear of the calculator, of the camera, of the internet. But what makes this wave different is that AI doesn't just replace limsit mimics cognition. Nobody forbids using calculators in math, but we still teach arithmetic to understand why formulas work. Nobody bans GPS, but we still learn how to navigate when the signal's gone. So with ChatGPT, the question is, do we teach how to think before we teach how to prompt? Because the difference between a great idea and a truly original one lies in the journey that created it. And in the age of AI, that question is more urgent than ever.